Chapter 14 deals with coding scripts. So this is going to be a little bit more like programming. And for those of you who are familiar with programming, you'll probably feel very comfortable doing this. For those of you that are not, you may find it a little bit more difficult. Make sure you read the chapter in the book, and then you can go through the chapter key points. And this is going to cover creating those types of scripts that you ran at the beginning of the semester to create the database files. So a lot of the things that you saw in those scripts are going to start to make sense after going through this chapter. So we start with a little overview about what kinds of statements that you can have in these scripts, and kind of more importantly, the statements that you cannot combine in a script. They have to be in their own little batch. And to put them in the same script, you have to put the keyword go in between. And that is why you saw go between certain segments of commands in the past couple weeks, because it was separating them into their own little batch. The keywords that you use in programming languages to control the flow of the program, you will also be using in SQL. So if and else statements, while loops, break and continue, even try and catch, those are all part of the SQL language, in addition to any other programming language that you are ever going to learn. So this chapter introduces you to the way that you incorporate those programming commands into SQL. And we kind of start with how to create variables. So you can do a scalar variable, which is just a single variable, or you can have table variables. And that would be like an entire result set. So, when you run a SQL query and you have more than one column displayed, that is similar to what a table variable is. So we start out with scalar variables, which are just single variables where you declare the variable name and give it the data type. Then we cover how to print these variables, because you can only print strings using the print command. And so if your variable is numeric, you actually have to convert it into character in order to print it. So we're finally going to be using the convert command to convert our numbers into characters so that we can print them out. And that is what this example is showing you. Then we get into creating table variables. And we'll start with creating temporary tables. We can do a local table, or we can do a global table. And the difference as far as creating them goes is one has a single hashtag in the name in the front, and the other one has a double hashtag. But there is a difference in where they can be used. So that is the primary difference. A global table can basically be used on anywhere on your network, whereas a local temporary table can only be used on your own machine. There's lots of different types of table objects that you can create in SQL, and we've actually worked with, well, now that we've talked about temporary tables, we've worked with all of them. So this is just a little summary of the different types of tables. Then we get into statements that alter the flow of execution. So this would be like an if-else statement and a while statement. And with an if-else, in most languages, you have your if and you have a condition you're testing, and then you have curly braces that surround your code. But in SQL, you have a begin statement and an end statement. Okay, and then in between are the statements that you execute. So it's set up a little bit different. Okay, so here are some examples. And for a while statement, we still have the keyword while, and then you still have a condition that you are checking. Okay, and so this is the condition. And then you'll notice again, instead of the curly braces, you have begin and you have end. In SQL, we do have exception handling using the try and catch commands. And what these commands do, it's the same as any other language. If there is an error, instead of seeing the dreaded red error message that stops your program from running or your script from running, if you use try and catch, you can handle the error and you can allow the script to continue running, so it won't stop. And that is kind of the point of using the try and catch. So this just tells you how to set up the try and catch in SQL. And then we get into some different system functions. Some of them are useful, like at identity returns the last value generated for an identity column. And if you remember, the identity column is typically used in a primary key, and it auto-generates the numbers. So at identity does become useful if you need to know what that last number was. At row count returns the number of rows that were affected by the most recent SQL statement. So you can see how many rows were changed. Let's say you did a delete and you expected one row to be deleted. You could actually check the row count to see how many were deleted. Okay, so here is just an example that uses them. Then we do talk about some session settings and different options that you can turn on and off. And then we talk a little bit about dynamic SQL, that you can run certain statements while your program is running using the exec statement. And we're not really going to get that much into these types of commands, these dynamic ones this week, but we will be working with procedures next week, and we will need to use the exec command at that time. So this is just a little introduction to that command. Once you're done reading the chapter and going through the lecture demo, the key points, you are going to do the textbook assignment, which does have all of the videos with it. And this is just going to give you practice doing scripts. Okay, so you'll be creating scalar variables, you'll be creating table variables, okay? And all of these are designed just to get you used to working with the variables and with the scripts. Okay, so this is going to be guided practice, and then you'll be doing the lab assignment, which is more on your own. So when you're going through the textbook assignment and when you're reading through the chapter key points, pay attention to those examples because they will help you complete the lab assignment. So for the lab assignment, you need to do a query that uses a scalar variable. Okay, and I would keep these queries really simple. Make sure you display the value that is being stored, and I would just do them as simply as possible. So you'll do a scalar variable, you'll also do a table variable. And you do have plenty of examples. So if we look back in here, now obviously you can't do the same example that I give you, but there are a lot of examples for you to look at. Okay, so here is a variable. And here we are using that variable to get the highest invoice from a particular vendor. So, I mean, you could get instead of vendor ID, you could look for another unique value in a key, maybe customer ID, and pull something from the customer. Okay, so this is basically using a value from a primary key to retrieve a maximum invoice total. So you could do something similar. And table variables typically do more than one column. So here we've got a big vendor table that we're creating here with the ID and the name. And so that's declaring it. This is actually copying the data into it. Okay. And then here we are retrieving the data from it. Okay, so you can do something similar. Okay, then you're going to do something on temporary tables. You'll do something with the if statement. So the if statement, you have to do a query that uses an if statement, one. Okay, so you only have to use one. And there's a pretty good example in here. This is great for an if. Basically, you can check to see if an object exists, right? So any of your tables, you can check to see if it is null or not. So this is any table in any database. You can say if object ID and then look up the table name is not null, then you can choose to print from it. That would take care of your if statement. Okay, so these don't have to be long and complicated. Okay, they can be very short and simple. Okay, but you're also going to need to do a while loop. Okay, and then you're going to need a try catch. Okay, so I did give you some examples here, but you're going to create your own and they can be similar. That's okay. Now, once you finish the lab assignment, then you're going to come down and do the quiz. And for the quiz, this will be open for a couple weeks and you do get 3 shots at it. So you'll take it to, a maximum of 3 times and it will record your highest score. So if you guys have any questions or run into problems, let me know. You will notice I have quite a few resources down here on this week's topics. So if you do feel a little fuzzy on any of the coding concepts, you can watch a video or read a tutorial. Also, you can certainly come into my office hours because I will help you too. So have a great week and let me know if you run into problems.